Okay. Hi there, I'm Rob White, and I've written several books, but the book I'm talking about today is called The Maestro Monologue. The Maestro Monologue is about the fact that I have discovered in my lifetime, and I've been here for 7 decades, that there are two of me. There's a maestro, fully capable of conducting my life in a way that my dreams come true. But there's the other self, the unwanted mental house guest, I call that other self. That's the naysaying voice in my head that tells me, nay, nay, you can't do it. So that's what my book is about. It's quite interesting and unique in the way I write it because my life has been interesting and unique in the way I've lived it. I went from being born in a small mill town, impoverished mill town, on the wrong side of the tracks on that impoverished mill town, and making tens of millions of dollars, if money is a measure, both in real estate and again in the restaurant business. And in order to do that, I had to constantly confront and deal with the other self, the intruder, who would convince me I didn't have what it takes to make the world that I wanted to make for myself.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. So, what inspired you to pursue writing in addition to your other careers? And what about self awareness and development specifically inspires you to write?
Well, what I've studied the nature of being a human being profoundly. I actually lived for 6 weeks with a Maasai tribe with an interpreter in Tanzania. And I realized that all human beings are basically the same. We all have our unique story, and that story lifts us or it depresses us. And I found that, in fact, the more complicated a society is, i.e., the United States versus Tanzania, it seems rather than it lifting us, the stories get so complicated that they confuse us and depress us. And so I then decided that it's time for me to give back, having been around and having the world give to me so much. And so I'm sharing in my book what it is that every one of us, so it's not like anyone can escape living with two selves. And the reason I know it is because I've traveled to many unique, exotic ports in the world and found the same thing everywhere.
So, I think you've touched on this next question a little bit already, but can you describe your purpose in writing the Maestro monologue? And what do you hope readers take away from reading your work?
Well, everything we do is selfish. And I mean, when you're selfish in a magnanimous way, it's wonderfully serving to the whole world. And we all do that. And we don't realize we do it. But if you're not selfish, you're not serving. You got to love what you're doing. Mother Teresa, who gave her whole life in the name of Jesus, and they said, "You're a saint, you sacrificed everything in the name of Jesus." And her response was, "Oh, heavens, no. I enjoyed it so much. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't have done it." See, there's the selfishness, but not selfish in a egocentric, give me way. I wrote the book because it took me 3 decades to understand what I wanted to write and 5 years to write this book. I've written several other books, but this one, 5 years. And why? Because I wanted to get down on paper what it is to be a human being and what stops us from being that incredible being that we came here to be as a human being. And so that was my motivation. And in doing that, I not only gave me a great gift by clarifying it, I believe those who read it will have a great gift because they will come to understand themselves in a way that they don't understand themselves, that will give them access to their potential unlike anything they had before.
So, you mentioned that you have other works. Is the Maestro monologue a standalone or is it part of a series? And are you building a collection of works that are building off of each other, or are they meant for like different people and purposes, each of your works?
Well, I've written the work before this, and then I met Margaret, was about the fact that life is always sending you everyday, ordinary, unassuming gurus to give you tips on how to redirect your life so you go where you want to go. This book is more about, so what stops you from redirecting your life if life is here to support you? Who's not supporting you? Well, guess what? You're not supporting you. What I am, the other self, the self that you think you are that you're not, that feels flawed. So yes, this will be a second of a series of books that I am writing to help clarify what we're thrown to be. Every one of us, for example, has the challenge, the biggest challenge you have, the biggest challenge I have, the biggest challenge anybody reading this has, is the fact that there is a self that feels flawed, inadequate, and unworthy. And it will convince you that you're not here to make it, you're just here to try to get by. And no one misses that self. Everyone is born into a conversation that is fraught with thoughts of no. From age 2 to 5, the child psychologists say every child hears 60,000 no's. By then, every child has an other self, a part of them that says, there's something wrong with me. And we live with that self for the rest of our lives. Yes, we can learn to handle it. And that's the folks who get on with their life wonderfully in spite of that self that'll scream, there's something wrong with me. And then there's the millions, nay, billions of people who barely make it because they listen to. So this book is, my next book will be more specifically, even more specific than this one, on how to handle that I am that insists there's something wrong with me.
So kind of a follow-up question to this answer. Do you think that your book is like tackling specific mechanisms to like reduce this like self-doubt? Or do you think it's more of like a general work about how to like combat this? Or do you think it's like a very specific like set of instructions type of book?
What I've got for feedback, and with my book, which has gotten a lot of reviews, I think even on your online book club, it's, I don't know, it's gotten a couple hundred views, mostly 4-star is your top, is people like the fact that I speak directly to them and give them specific ways of dealing with what I'm talking about so they can handle it. So that is what I have gotten good at, because I have made so many mistakes in my life. See, I believe the more you fail, the more you succeed. If you get the point of failing is to learn from it, tweak what you're doing, do it again and succeed. So I suspect I have failed a million times more than someone else my age who, see, I get life is risky business and I'm in the risky business. So I take risks. If you take risks, you live tall. If you try to avoid risks, you live small, but then you're not living, you're just surviving. So I believe I've taken a lot of risks, made a lot of mistakes, come up with a lot of specific ways to deal with it. And if you go to the book, you'll find that it's very personal and it's about you. And I don't just generalize or philosophize or tell broad stories and metaphors. I get right down to the nitty gritty. What can I do?
Yeah, it sounds like it's a very important book for everybody to read. So now more to like your writing career itself. How is your formal education translated to your writing?
So my street education, I did go to college and I do have a master's degree, and I even have 45 credits toward a PhD, but then I decided it wasn't for me. It didn't do anything. I say it wasn't college, it was the school, the world school, the street that taught me everything I needed to know to be successful. I claim life is the greatest school you can attend if you're willing to attend the lessons that life offers you and learn from them and know you're going to make a lot of mistakes in the learning. That's part of the deal. So what was your question again? Oh, how did that have to do with me? I don't think I was an English major. And so you'd say, well, that's why you love to read. And I do love to read, and I love to philosophize, and I love to read philosophy. But what I love best is to write. Now, let me tell you the secret to writing. There's one thing. We can all think easily, and we can all often speak what we think easily. But when you have to slow down and write what you're thinking, it gets complicated. What the secret to good writing, Stephen King taught me this, and I mean personally, I've been in his company. The only way you can be a good writer is to assume you're sitting down with someone in the living room and you're talking to them. In his case, he tells stories, and you tell them a story. You know how easy it is when you're telling the story? Well, you've got to learn to write with that ease, and don't think you have to add and overcomplicate. And so that's where people lose it. Writer's block is you're thinking too much. Believe it or not, you don't want to think so much. You want to think less and write more. And E.E. Cummins said when he had someone, a student, say to him, "Oh, you're such an incredible poet and writer and author. What's the secret?" And he said, "The secret to good writing is to write and write and write and realize you're awful. And then write and write and write some more and realize maybe you're getting better, but you're still awful. And then write some more until you finally think not bad, but then write and write and write. And before you know it, you're finally a writer." And that's what it really is. If you have something precious to say and you want to get down on paper so others can enjoy it and learn from it, write and write and write. Keep it simple. The biggest gift on a computer when you're writing on a computer is the delete button. Anybody who's a good author deletes like crazy. We all overwrite. Some people overtalk. Many people overtalk. I overtalk. But when it comes to writing, you can't afford to overwrite. So be quick. And you know what? The problem is when you write an idea down, it's your baby. It's precious. You birthed it and you love it. But if it's not really necessary, toss it out. If it's just because it's clever and you think it should be there, or you don't want to leave it because it's perfect with what was said before, which was the exact same thing in a different way, you don't need it twice. Toss it out. So there's a big tip for anyone. That delete button is your greatest gift. Don't be afraid to use it.
So I think, probably as a writer, that a lot of people say that one of the hardest things is like finding the time to write and balancing it with everything else in their lives. So how do you balance your writing career with your personal life and your other careers that you've mentioned?
Well, we're addictive human beings, all of us. So do know that you can't get rid of being an addictive being. Being human is being addictive. I have an inspiring addiction. My inspiring addiction, that which inspires me, as opposed to a harmful addiction, one which would harm me, is writing. So I see writing as something that is compelling every day. And when I know that I'm going to write today, I don't have a strategy, a methodology, or a process to be sure I got the time. I just allow it to show up, and it shows up, and I take care of everything else, knowing that writing is what I'm really treasuring and wanting to get to. So if I wake up at 5, I've gone to bed at midnight and woke up at 3 and realized, wow, I want to write. So I totally succumb to the inspiring addiction, write, and write. So I don't think being logical sometimes is the way to go, because that when you start getting reasonable and logical about, I want to spend 3 hours a day, 2 hours a day, an hour and a half day writing, then you find all kinds of other stuff gets in the way. I claim when you really come from, I love writing, what I am as an author, and this is how I express myself, and I love the way I express myself, it just shows up, I find time in the day. And if I'm spending too much time on something, I immediately I've got to complete with what I'm doing because I've got to create space for writing. I love writing like that. Are you a writer?
Sometimes I think it's more for fun.
Okay, just curious whether you.
Yeah, so I think you've touched on this question a little bit too. There's definitely a lot of great advice that you've given for aspiring writers, but is there any other advice that you haven't touched on yet that you think is important?
Well, I think that you see, writers don't get caught up in writing from your head. And that's not where it's at. Write from your heart. If you're willing to trust that what you have to say will show up on paper or on the computer, just write from how you feel. It'll flow, it'll make sense, and in the end, it'll touch those that read it. Too many writers, for example, I have gone to several writing schools, and I find that most writers get too technical. They want 11 steps I have to take to be a good writer, 4 steps to break my writer's block. They want recipes and prescriptions and strategies. And I've learned that I've tried a lot of those recipes and they're okay, and you end up with a mediocre book. But when I've spoken to really incredible authors, which I have, I make a point to meet them and go to lunch with them, like Stephen King. I find that they write from their heart. They have a feeling and they say, okay, it's coming on, get out of the way. And they go right to their computer, or some still write with pencil and paper. And they just sit down and let what's showing up show up in writing. So that's my greatest tip to you folks. You all got it. Writing is as natural as speaking. And when you were 2 years old, you figured out, oh boy, I want to talk. Well, at some point, if you're in the business now of writing, you figured out, oh boy, I want to write. Well, don't get in the way. You didn't get in the way when you were learning to speak. You didn't buy books on how can I speak, because you couldn't read, so you couldn't have read the books. Thank goodness. You just took on, I love mom and dad, what they're up to called communicating. You said it in your own little simple way, and I'm going to get me a piece of that. And you started speaking, but you spoke from your heart, and you didn't mind if you made mistakes because you were on your way and you knew you were on your way. No different with writing.
I think that's very good advice. So that's all the questions that I had for you. But is there anything else that you feel like you want to say, or like anything about your book that you think that people who are watching should know?
Well, I think two things I want to say. I think that the Online Book Club is an incredible club of individuals, human beings that help each other, inspire each other, love reading, love writing. I mean, that's phenomenal. And I want to acknowledge and appreciate all of you folks for that reason. What a great support group you are for yourself and everyone else. Secondly, I think the reason my book is important to any author is because, first of all, if you read it, I have become a wordsmith. Now, I don't say that arrogantly, but I have written so many things that I really know how to write now in a way that's simple and elegant, poetic. And you'll see that in the book. I've heard many people say that. You really know how to handle words. And I want you to know, 7 years ago when I wrote, and then I met Margaret, I'm embarrassed. Actually, the book did very well. We sold about 10,000 copies and got a lot of great reviews. But I'm embarrassed. But I'm not embarrassed. I'm glad I took the courage to write the book and get it out there. I didn't wait until I was perfect. That I'm still not perfect. But boy, this book is so much better. Write. Publish your book. Don't try to make it perfect. You'll never get there. When you're feeling satisfied with, you know what, this feels right for me, self-publish or whatever you're doing, get it to a publishing company and take care of business. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rob, for taking the time to talk with me. And for those of you that are watching this recording, if you haven't already, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. The link to the Maestro monologue will be in the video description for those of you that want to try it.
Thank you very much. This was great. Thank you.